Good evening, this is Whitney Bennett, the U.S. representative for the University of Queensland School of Medicine, Ochsner Clinical School. And I'm happy to have you all here with me tonight. For any of you fellow allergy sufferers, I'm sure you'll understand if you hear any funny sounds during this presentation. It's allergy season here in New York. So I apologize for any disruptions in advance. The purpose of the webinar this evening is to speak about the admissions and application process, as well as hopefully bring to life the school and the program to you. So I'll make an introduction to the school, go through the admissions and application process, and then we'll take questions. Anything that isn't addressed tonight, you should feel free to email me. We'll also have a transcript, and I'll identify unanswered questions and reach out to those of you whose answers we might not get to this evening. I do want to just give a little context of my background, because I think having been a pre-health program director and a pre-med advisor for many, many years within the U.S. undergrad and post-bac system, it gives me a really unique vantage point, I think, to talk about this program, similarities and differences with the U.S. medical schools. I've spent time both in the U.S. medical schools, many of them touring with my pre-med students, as well as have spent a lot of time now in New Orleans at the clinical school, as well as a number of visits over to Australia to our campuses there. So to get started, you can see at the page we're looking at now our three campuses. The top one is the St. Lucia campus. That's the main campus of the University of Queensland in Brisbane. And Hurston, which is where the medical school campus and buildings are, is quite close. But there are classes held for the medical students on St. Lucia as well. The middle picture is Ipswich, and that is the suburb of Brisbane. It's about 40 minutes away, and it's a lovely small community. There are about 100 med students that go there. It's a science campus, so you also have other health professions students there as well. So it's a really nice option for those of you who have been at big schools and who want something smaller, or just have been at small schools and want to stay at small schools. The third image is of the main Ochsner hospital system in New Orleans, and that's about 15 minutes from the central business district and the French Quarter of the downtown area of New Orleans. The second picture is of Brisbane, which is a beautiful city of 2 million. And this past week, I actually was with one of our deans from Brisbane giving a presentation in Seattle. And I, for the last 3 years, having traveled back and forth to Brisbane, kept saying to people, it really reminds me of my hometown of Seattle. So I was glad to have one of the deans, who's a Brisbane woman born and raised, to come to Seattle and ask her, did she agree with my take on it? And she did. I have to say it's a very safe city. It's an easy city to figure out. At the same time, it's a little exotic and different. So I think you have, the best of both worlds, of the pleasure of being somewhere different, but not being so different that it's an adjustment that takes away from your focus on medical school. This is an image from St. Lucia, the main campus. University of Queensland is one of the top 3 schools in Australia. I think that's important for you to consider as a potential student, because you want to be in classes with other very strong students who are as academically prepared as you are. And so the University of Queensland, being a selective school in Australia, affords you that opportunity to be with other highly qualified students. So a little bit of background on the University of Queensland. You can see it was founded in 1909. It's big. It doesn't feel big, and I'll speak more in terms of why that is as far as how the medical school curriculum is delivered. But very important, it's Australia's international university. So there you have the global component of being with students from around the world, both in your medical school and just throughout the whole University of Queensland school. But it also, because they've had international students for many years, it means they have the support systems in place to assist you in your transition and to support you while you're in Australia. So really keeping things going smoothly for you as a student. Again, as a medical school student, you don't want to be distracted or have other kind of transitional issues that would take you away from your studies. And that doesn't happen at UQ. This is a picture of the outside of the medical school. This is where your deans have offices, your UQ Ochsner advisor has an office, and again, other general support services for medical school students. So a little more detail about the medical school itself. So it was founded a few years after the university. Australia doesn't have a lot of medical schools, and so the intake, and I know this looks frightening to American students who are used to seeing classes of 120 to maybe 200, 250 at our largest med schools. For the Ochsner UQ program, the most students that can come in a year are 120, and then they take 120 students from other parts of the world, and then about 300 Australian students. They have a lot of research going on, and one of the biggest advancements made recently in terms of our first cancer vaccine came out of the University of Queensland. They also have a very active, independent student organization, and they do a lot of professional development programs. There are opportunities for community service as well as social activities. This is all student-run and actually independent from the university. And this is a picture of the outside of the main Ochsner Hospital in Jefferson Parish, outside again of downtown New Orleans. And this is one of a number of facilities that Ochsner offers for training, but it's one of the main places where clinical rotations take place. So for those of you participating who are from the South, Ochsner is very well known, sometimes referred to as the Mayo Clinic of the South. Sometimes people from outside of the region have not heard of it, but it is a quite prestigious institution. It was founded in 1942. Alton Ochsner was had been with Tulane and had some ideas about the importance of medical school faculty actually being involved in patient care. And as I understand it, some differences in philosophy, and so broke off from Tulane and established the Ochsner Clinic. And he was, contributed and involved in identifying the link between cigarette smoking and cancer. And Ochsner is, as you can see, a world leader in organ transplants, and I'll speak a little bit about current specialties where Ochsner stands out nationally within the U.S. As I said, different hospitals and different clinics in different kinds of communities, so depending on whether you're interested in rural or remote or urban, a lot of different opportunities for clinical training. A lot of patient contact, substantial clinical research going on, excuse me, and a lot of residencies. We're often asked if there are residencies that are saved for UQ Ochsner students. That's not something that the hospital can do, but certainly with the extensive residencies for those students who excel in their grades and excel in their rotations, the residency program directors are going to want to snap you up for residencies. Ochsner has been a training area for Tulane and LSU medical students for decades. So this is something that Ochsner is very good at. So it affords the UQ Ochsner cohort the opportunity to go into a very well-established teaching hospital. So the program. So the program is very similar to the U.S. medical school sequence. Basic sciences in the first 2 years with clinical, and that is something that I think differentiates it, is the kind of clinical training that you have the opportunity to get even before you start your third year, and I will speak more about that. UQ School of Medicine curriculum all 4 years. So important to note that although you may be at campuses between moving from your second year to your third year that are quite far away. The program is very tightly integrated. And so you won't feel like you've gone from one school to a whole different kind of institution. It's well organized and seamless. And the clinical experience that you get, even in Australia, is building to prepare you for getting a competitive residency and ultimately to practice in the U.S. But of course gives you the global scope and philosophy. Should you want to be involved in something like Partners in Health or Doctors Without Borders, you will have had that global component to your training that would position you well for those kind of jobs. First 2 years in Australia, and then you come back to the U.S. And we know from speaking with our residents that what they're getting within their training really does allow them to stand out when they go for their interviews for their residencies. The Australian degree, you are getting a degree from the University of Queensland, an Australian medical school, and in their system, that's the MBBS. It is recognized as the equivalent, and we are often asked, can I change that to an MD when I'm ready to practice? And you can. And in some states, for example, Louisiana, you actually just automatically can start using the MD when you have an MBBS degree. In other states like New York, you have to file some paperwork and pay a fee, and you then can use the MD. So it's absolutely equivalent. You do have a year 1 and year 4 clinical experiences that you do in Australia. In year 4, there's some flexibility on which rotation it is that you do back in Australia, and you work that out with the dean. Your classes you're mixed in with the other Australian and international students. And if you haven't been to Australia or that part of the world, January would be the end of their summer, at the beginning of their fall. And so that the school year is always January through November, and we just have the one entry time, and that is January. So the basic sciences, the main way that the systems that you're learning are reinforced is through problem-based learning, and that is system-based, where you look at cases that are patient cases based on the module you're learning at that time. And for those of you who want to dig down deeper, from the School of Medicine website, if you look in the section of the website called Program Structure, it will show you the sequence of the content that you go through in order. So that's about 65% of your time, where you're in groups of 10 to 12 students. So again, they're mixed with Australians, with the other international students, and yourself. Clinical coaching, also groups of 10. In the first year, clinical coaching is where you're practicing how to do patient histories and some basic clinical work with the other students in your clinical coaching group. In year 2, your faculty member who's a clinician, you're out in the hospital with him or her, and then you're actually with real patients doing your patient histories. And one of the things that University of Queensland Medical School really focuses on is repetition of these basic clinical skills that you're getting in years 1 and years 2, so that you're really ready to go with patients in year 3. You do have standard lectures, so you might be in a big lecture room with a couple hundred other students, a couple times a week. Again, that's a smaller percentage of the time of how your learning is done. And then you have labs as well as tutorials. USMLE is encouraged to begin in year 1. You're given resources, you're given free resources as a UQ Ochsner student. And in year 1, I'll go into more detail, it's a little more informal. And then in year 2, there are tutors that work with the Ochsner UQ students to start ramping up, doing numerous USMLE Step 1 practice exams, and then taking that at the end of year 2. You do have dedicated UQ Ochsner advisors in Australia. So then year 3, you come to New Orleans. You start in January because, again, you're following the UQ School of Medicine curriculum throughout and do your rotations. And again, year 4, you'll choose one rotation that you do back in Australia. The residency match advising starts early on in year 3. And one of the things that we think is a potential advantage, we think it played out with this year with our first group that matched, is that your residency interviews actually start just when you're graduating at that end of that 4th year. So you have more clinical experience under your belt when you're going through the match interviews than someone on the U.S. calendar, someone going to a U.S. med school. You also will have had more clinical experience before you take step 2 clinical knowledge and clinical skills. So our USMLE support program. This was custom designed for UQ, for the UQ Ochsner cohort, by a former dean of medicine at Brown University Medical School, and it has been revised as needed with input from the students, from the UQ Ochsner students, and we think that it now is customized to the point of what's working for the students. And I think our USMLE scores can attest to that. So years 1 and 2, you do have tutoring. Year 1 is more voluntary, and as I said before, year 2 is more structured with regular times every week that you meet with your tutor to go over questions. First aid and Kaplan's Q banks have been popular and have been working to date, and there's also a library there which you can use. And as I mentioned, there's the time advantage that the UQ Ochsner students have because of the calendar. Residency advising is taken very seriously. As I said, it begins early on when you get to Ochsner in New Orleans. They do individualized advising and counseling, helping people figure out kind of, based on their skills and interests, what would be residencies, specialties to consider. So getting help really teasing that out. They have kind of like career fairs, I guess I would say, where you'll have the opportunity to talk with specialists about what they do and try to get an idea if that is a good match for you. I know that graduates told me that they have, shadowed certain specialists to see, getting a better idea if they might want to do that kind of work day in and day out. Mock interviews, application advice. So you get a lot of assistance. I think if you look at kind of assistance that hopefully some of you are getting from your pre-med advisors, whether it's filling out applications, working on your AMCAS, that same idea of getting support, navigating the whole residency match application process. I think it's important to note your dean's letter is compiled in Ochsner in New Orleans. And so the references that you're getting from your rotation program directors are the U.S.-based physicians in the program, and often also have written letters for the Tulane and LSU students that rotate through. So oftentimes the people writing your references are already known to residency directors, to programs that you may be applying to around the country. And that's something that is kind of, I guess, the best of both worlds, where you've had this global component, but at the same time, the dean's letter and references that you're getting are very much within the U.S. academic medical environment. In addition to really getting superior clinical skills and training, both in Australia and in New Orleans, you also have the opportunity to take advantage of research opportunities in both places. And one thing I want to mention that's not on this slide that you can look up if you do a search of TRI Brisbane, That's Translational Research Institute, Brisbane. Construction of the physical plant of the institute was just finished when we were there this past January, and it's amazing, and in fact is one of the few, they say, translational research institutes in the world where you have going from bench to patient to actually the pharmaceutical connection all in one place. And it's right next to Princess Alexandra Hospital, which is one of the teaching hospitals where our students in your clinical coaching can be assigned during year 2. So again, the research area is right next to one of the teaching hospitals. And as I had mentioned before, Gardasil came out of University of Queensland, and Dr. Ian Fraser, who is a co-inventor of Gardasil, is the director and CEO of the Translational Research Institute. So again, you can do a search of TRI Brisbane to find out more about what kind of research is going on there if that's something that you're interested in pursuing. There's also a lot of clinical research going on at Ochsner as well. So, year 1 and year 2, you want to focus on getting those great grades in your classes and preparing well for step 1. So not everyone has a chance to do research in year 1 or year 2, but certainly in year 3, almost all of our students in year 3 or year 4 are involved in research in New Orleans. So students in Australia could either seek out PIs that they want to work with or research through these classified ads, but there is also a formal program between your first and second year where you can do research for 8 weeks in Australia and get a stipend. That's a competitive application. There's also a program, the Medical Student Leadership Program is a certificate that students can get through the business school in conjunction with the School of Medicine, and that's a great opportunity. So for those of you unfamiliar with the University of Queensland, we have this slide up because we want to give you a context for understanding how solid University of Queensland is in terms of its rankings internationally in the biomedical and life sciences. And as you can see in that top 40 range, that it's surrounded by University of California, San Francisco, one of our top 5 medical schools. UQ in biomedical and life sciences is on other international rankings list as well. So this U.S. News is just one of among 3 or 4 rankings that UQ is highly rated on. Ochsner as well, equally known for its excellence. As you can see, it's in the top 15 teaching hospitals from its work with Tulane and LSU. So it's a highly ranked teaching hospital, as well as a hospital distinguished for its patient care. That, of course, is important to you as future physicians because you want to be training with people who are masters at caring for the people coming to them. So you're really getting modeled and trained by master physicians. In terms of this, 11 specialties, a few pulmonology, cardiology, and heart surgery, GYN and gastroenterology are just a few examples of those 11 specialties, and you can find the complete list on Ochsner's website. We're proud of the fact that the American Medical Association pointed to UQ Ochsner as an example of really the forefront of medical education. As many of you are probably aware, more and more U.S. schools are looking at trying to offer international rotations to their medical school students in years 3 or 4. And that's an initiative that the AAMC is working on right now. But this is something that's already in place, and it's already in place again at 200 institutions who have been training medical school students for decades. So again, a question I get a lot, but is the way I'm going to be presented the basic sciences in Australia close enough to what I'm going to need to know for the USMLE for me to be able to get those scores I want so I can get the competitive residency that I want? And I think that our first-time pass rate on step 1 speaks to that. The courses at UQ obviously are not taught to the USMLE, And I think those of you, learning to be clinicians wouldn't want to be taught to a test, but would want to be learning the content that you need to know to be agile clinicians. But again, you then get that built-in support for getting ready for the USMLE through the program we have of, again, access to the Q banks and to review sources during the first year and the formalized tutoring and structure for practicing step one during the second year. And so for our first group, who we're very, very proud of, you can see the sample of the residency programs that they are going into. They all matched in their top 3 choices. And so I think especially the fact that we have a 100% residency match in a year where there were American students educated in the U.S. who didn't get positions, didn't match, says something about the quality of the education that our students are getting and how they did in the interviews and what the residency directors thought of them. They all matched. We're also proud of the fact that while students do need to be permanent residents or U.S. citizens, we have students in our cohort who are born from countries across the world. And so this diversity and this global component exists even within our cohort. And you can see some samples of schools, but really we have almost all states represented and quite a range from large state schools to small private schools from coast to coast and through the middle and south of the country. So for the students who started this past January, you can see the average both for the master's and the bachelor's is about a 3.4, and the average MCAT about a 29. I want to point out that for some reason this is the first year where we really haven't been about 50-50 on the female to male. It's a little more on the male side this year, I'm not sure why, but overall in our cohort and at the school it is closer to 50-50. So because of this global awareness, I would say the kind of student that is drawn to the school has a very community service and often social justice focus and awareness. The Haiti mission, actually, Ochsner recently developed with partners in Haiti a clinic there, and in fact for a rotation called Medicine in Society, our students can apply to do 4 of the 8 weeks of that rotation at the clinic in Haiti. And so this was our first group who went over to see the clinic pictured here. Habitat for Humanity in New Orleans still is doing a lot of work, and so students have volunteered for that. And then the chapter of the Student Medical Society in New Orleans adopted a public high school, and they go and do fairs and presentations throughout the school year. And so these are the activities they do. I think a wonderful contribution that the OMSA, the Ochsner Medical Student Association, gives to incoming students is a student-created handbook, survival guide, and the Brisbane Arrival Guide. And they really do serve to bridge that transition from when you land to helping you find housing. Of course, the university has formal structures, but the current students that are over already in Australia really make them available to the new students coming over, and in fact assign to those interested a mentor. So once you've matriculated at the school, you're definitely coming. The students then have us forward you their information, and they assign you a mentor who you can even get in touch with before landing to help make the transition smooth. So in summary, the school offers a distinguishing global academic medical experience. And jumping actually to the last point, where you're expected to compete with U.S. students, I can say from my work with one of the graduates meeting with students out in California that she was never questioned with, I guess, any kind of skepticism about having graduated from University of Queensland, Ochsner, but in fact it was seen as an asset and met with a very positive reception. And that's what we were expecting. It's wonderful to hear that, in fact, that's how it has played out. And that, in fact, that stretch that our students have done with the experience in Australia, as well as the kind of training they get at Ochsner, have made them very appealing candidates for residency. With a highly ranked international university academically behind you and training you, and then your third and fourth year at, again, in a highly ranked teaching hospital at a solid U.S. academic medical center, give you a really great training. So our students are visionary, they're also grounded, and I think that that's something that is particular to the University of Queensland Ochsner program. So it's for those of you who look at the world differently, but we know who also want to be competitive and have solid careers here in the U.S., but who may go beyond that, but certainly who know that they're going to use that global component treating their patients here in the U.S. So for any of you who haven't seen on our website, the admissions requirements are bachelor's or master's degree within 10 years. Terminal degrees are what the admissions office look at. So if someone has a Bachelor of Arts that's 11 years old and has recently done post-bac work, unfortunately, in that case, you would need to get a medical master's or some 1 or 2 year master's degree in order to be considered. And I can say this is having worked with post-bac students for a long time. You know, I've lobbied and we continue to lobby for the possibility, but I can say that for 2014, that's not going to change, and so it is a very strict line. It has to be a terminal degree within 10 years in order for you to be considered. B average. Good news about the B average is because Australia is on the 1 to 7 scale, when the conversion is done from the US 4.0 scale, the B average ends up being a 2.7. If you have questions on whether or not your GPA might be okay, please email me. But in fact, when we say B average, it's not a B average on our scale, which would be a 3.0, but it's actually on our scale, it ends up being a 2.7. Minimum MCAT score of 24 must be taken within 3 years. So 2011 for this 2014 January entering class. One exception that has been made is a 7 in one section if you then have a 24 overall. Your other two sections, obviously 9, 8, or higher. If you're familiar with FAFSA, if you look on FAFSA, University of Queensland is listed there. So eligible students may apply for U.S. financial aid. And there are 2 full-time financial aid advisors based in Brisbane at UQ who work with North American students. So that, again, is not a stress of if you're using the financial aid, you've got people there with you to help navigate all that. So how can you hear more either from faculty or students? Come to an open house in New Orleans. The 3rd and 4th year students are a very central part of that program. And if you can't make it down to New Orleans, as you may have seen on our website, in New York, on the 3rd of June, we have a graduate who will be with us at Fordham University talking about her experience. On the 4th of June, we're in Washington, D.C., also with a graduate, and the 5th of June in Chicago with a graduate. These are great opportunities. These students are starting their residencies in July, so this will be a rare opportunity, at least for the next few months, to meet one of the graduates. So hopefully if you're near any of those cities, you can come. We also are just finalizing webinars with our current Ochsner students for over the summer. And just watch for an announcement via email on our website. And we'll have a webinar similar to this one this evening, but actually have current students with us. So thank you for your attention. That completes my presentation on the school and the admissions process. So I'm going to have my colleagues here who have been receiving your questions. And
Actually, I got one in advance in my email today, and this applicant asks, does UQ have opportunities for students to engage in international volunteer work outside of Australia, so in other parts of the world? So there's definitely networking. They happen to have a campus in Brunei and certainly have a very international faculty who are involved in projects around the world. This would be something that you would network with the dean's office or with faculty on to get an experience in another part of the world. It wouldn't be something you could do for a rotation. The rotations are in New Orleans or at UQ. But certainly, because the program is such an international faculty doing research on clinical work, there are definitely networking opportunities so that, say, between year 1 and year 2, if you wanted to go to Senegal, you could work with a faculty member to set something up at a clinic or hospital that he or she had an affiliation with there. I have a question about how are the students evaluated: pass, fail, letter grade? A numeric scale is 1 to 7, and 5, 6, or 7 are what medical school students would need to get in order to be in good standing academically. Does Ochsner give scholarship money to U.S. applicants, to students in the UQ Ochsner program? They would love to. Right now, the only funding that's available is actually available through the Australian American Association, and there is, I believe, a link to that scholarship information and application on our homepage. And it is for research. It's competitive, but we have had 1 or 2 students, actually, I think every year, who have won that scholarship and who are using it to do research while in school. So I would again suggest people look at the Australian American Association webpage for information about that scholarship. Timeline, okay, great question. It's rolling admissions. Admissions is open, and we have a number of students accepted already for January 2014. So because we're rolling, admissions close when we're full. So the best advice I can give to you is to file an application now. If you're graduating, you can send us your transcripts when you have your final transcript that says the degree's been conferred. And if you have your MCATs, you can send those in now. If you don't have your MCATs or your transcript, you can still file your application and send us your documents when they're available. So question, from when I file, how long will I know before I'm accepted? So that can take 6 to 8 weeks. Sometimes shorter, but 6 to 8 weeks is the average. After you're accepted, then there is a 6-week time frame that you have to make a decision about whether or not you want to enroll in the school. During that period, you're offered a student ambassador, and we try to connect you with someone from your undergraduate institution or your hometown who's already in the school. So you have kind of like backgrounds to compare from. The students also have a Facebook page that is closed. None of the administration, none of us in New York, no one in the administration in Australia is involved in, so it gives students a chance for student-to-student conversation about their experience in the school. Tuition, okay, another great question. Tuition is $56,000, and that is just tuition. And it's set in US dollars. That's important. You don't have to worry about currency fluctuation. The UQ international student, there's a website, a part on the website that gives estimates about living costs. It seems to be about $20,000 for living expenses each year for school. So is there someone in both Brisbane and New Orleans assigned to me as an advisor? There are definitely point people who are advisors in Brisbane and in New Orleans, and for different areas. So again, you have financial aid advisors, you have a general overall advisor, you have your Dean of Student Affairs, all of these people based in Brisbane, and also then advisors about rotations and organizing rotations and those other aspects once you get to New Orleans. So there really is a robust support system for you in both places, I've seen it ramp up since I've been working with the school for the last number of years, so they've really ramped up as the size of the UQ Ochsner cohort has grown. And someone's asking which rotation is done in Australia during year 4. There are a few to choose from, and that's worked out with your dean as to which rotation you would do there and at what time during your 4th year that would be done. Another question, I have a husband and 2 children. How feasible will it be for him to work while I'm in school? So automatically on the student visa of a professional school student, the partner or spouse can work 20 hours a week. In terms of availability of jobs, as I said before, Brisbane's a city of 2 million. It has quite a diverse workforce, so you could look into, depending on the profession that a person's partner or spouse and what kind of opportunities there are. Okay, great. Another good question. Is there an interview as part of the application process? So the University of Queensland does not interview whether you're an Australian or a UQ Ochsner applicant. That's not part of the evaluation process. And that decision was based on the fact that when research was done, information gathered at the interview didn't predict whether or not a student would be successful in medical school, happy with the profession, or a successful clinician. So that is something that UQ looked at seriously and decided to discontinue a while back. I will say, though, what we try to do is to provide you with as many opportunities as possible to interview the school to make sure it's right for you. So again, whether it's our information sessions that include graduates or the dean or other faculty members or the student ambassador program, the open house in New Orleans, we try to create opportunities for you to interview the school. Do I need letters of recommendation like US and Canada? It's optional, although I do recommend with the application, having sent in letters of reference you have, they're certainly useful, especially to help the kind of early foundation for your dean's letter, which is, again, very similar to a committee letter that's done for U.S. medical school application. The dean's letter for residency program is an overall evaluation of you, and so having actually these letters of recommendation or committee letter that you have on hand is helpful to have. So I encourage people to send those in, even though they're optional. When is the latest point in the year that I can apply? If we're not full, it's getting a student visa and actually getting on a plane and getting over to Australia is quite easy. So realistically, it can be done through early December. The school year starts in about the 3rd week of January. So one needs to be in Australia by the 1st week of January to have time to get housing and get settled, get used to the time difference, but it's doable in a short window. Will I need a car in Australia? No. They have fantastic public transportation. It's a very health and sports oriented country, so most people ride bikes, skateboards, walk. But as I said, the public transportation is great, and the school is not that far away from any of a number of lovely neighborhoods, so you can get around off campus and enjoy yourself very easily without a car. Can I practice in Australia after I graduate? Technically, yes. So it's hard to get a residency in Australia. It's something that, I guess I should say, once you start the program, the UQ Ochsner cohort for the 2-2 sequence, you stay in that. So should you fall in love with Australia or an Australian, you can't transfer to stay in the 4-year program. Obviously, you've done clinical rotations, you have a degree from Queensland, so you're eligible, but it's competitive to get a residency. So I've heard the dean say the best strategy really is to do your residency in the U.S., get licensed here, establish yourself, and then apply to work over there. That's how you would have optimal opportunities for yourself. I'm getting questions of, is the Facebook page available now so I can talk to current students? It's getting set up for the January 2014 entry by the current students right now. Again, that is a student-run endeavor, so we'll keep people posted on that. That's an automatic information update for those of you who are accepted or who have already decided to enroll. For those of you who are in the middle of the application process, check back with us. We'll also obviously keep you informed with that opportunity. Someone wanted to see the match list again. And I'll add right now, so you can see the example of one of our students is going into physical medicine and rehab at Emory. And so this person then actually, there are selective rotations, so not core rotations, but selective rotations that on an application and evaluation process, you are able to do away from Ochsner. Again, it's case by case. So what this student did, knowing that Emory had one of the top programs in physical medicine and rehab, did a rotation there and developed those relationships, and the name was out there so that when the application to that program was done, this person was successful and is now doing, the PM rehab residency at Emory. And again, someone's asking, will I have an advisor to talk to at UQ? Absolutely. You'll meet that person during the orientation. There's a phenomenal orientation to both the medical school and to the overall university itself. Housing, which in Australian speak is called accommodations, they have orientation sessions. International students has various orientation sessions. The Medical Student Society has numerous activities to welcome you and to help you meet people in your class and make new friends. Culturally, Australians are just a very welcoming, warm group of people, and I guess this is another question I get sometimes is there, any feeling of encroachment or awkwardness to the U.S. Ochsner cohort, and it's just the opposite. They're so welcoming, so happy to have you. The four-year Australian students get to do some rotations at Ochsner, so that's nice. The friends that you make who are Australians in the program there, or even other international students, you'll end up seeing in New Orleans, which is really nice. One last question I'm going to take, and that is, if I graduate in the winter and residencies start in July, what do I do in the 6 months in between? So I'll give you a few examples. We have a few students a couple went back to Australia, wanted more experience there, had built relationships, and did that. Another student married an Australian, so he moved over here, and they are, getting ready to move to where her residency is, and got a house and a puppy and that kind of thing. And other people are working in research here. One person is doing an accelerated MPH program. So a big variety, and it is an advantage because you have that time to decompress in between finishing medical school and starting your residency. You have time to move to a new city and get settled before residency orientations can often start in mid-June. So it really does give you time to decompress. And there's a number of things you can do. Ochsner certainly is supportive if you want to stay in New Orleans and do research there in helping you with that. So again, I want to thank you. My email is on the website. It's wbennett@mededpath.org. If I didn't answer your question, please email me. Again, I'll have a transcript, so any that I see, I'll be reaching out to you. And again, I thank you for your interest and participation, and I wish you well in your journey to become a physician. Good night.